Thank you so much, Mrs. Christine Mir, Deputy Director of CAP Conscience et Liberté. Thank you for pointing out the role of women in peace building and in democratic transition, and the importance of having female leaders also taking the decision and also taking the floor in negotiations of peace, and also in fighting against extremism, radical Islamists especially. We know that women, as Iman says, are discriminated against, and they are not included within the process of democracy in Sudan. So this is a call to include women also in decision making and to stop the discourse of radical Islamists regarding the exclusion of women from decision making. We move to our next speaker, Mrs. Alona Lebedieva, who is a businesswoman and president of Arum Group and president of foundation of Arum Foundation in Brussels. We are really honored to have her today, giving support from Ukrainian women to Sudanese women, which is very beautiful. We also want to share our support with the Ukrainian people and also with Ukrainian women, and we stand with Ukraine from the European Parliament, and we are really honored to have Mrs. Lebedieva today to share her speech and support for young children and Sudanese women. Thank you.
Here, throughout the whole history, we can observe different examples of daily participation of Russia in various state coup d'etat all over the world. And even now, it seems in the 21st century, Russia cynically satisfies its imperial ambitions by annexing foreign territories and even staging full-scale military invasions on the territories of independent sovereign states. What is happening now in Sudan is the height of cynicism. Russia, using standard scenarios, is trying to seize power, setting up its military installations, and then, using the full ownership of rights, invade sovereign states, and allegedly is trying to restore quasi-justice. Thus, what we see today in Sudan, and the same scenario was played out in Ukraine in 2014, with the annexation of Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine. Why do I compare these two stories? We can observe a lot of publications which declare the absence of Russian militaries in Sudan. The same thing has happened with Ukraine for the whole 8 years. They bombed our civilians, raped, killed, destroyed our territories, but cynically declared, we are not here. And we can see the circumstances. On the 24th of February at 5 p.m., peaceful sleeping Ukrainian cities were bombed. The second reason of Russia's involvement in Sudan war is the participation of the special military group Wagner, which is confirmed by many publications and expert investigations. Private military company Wagner is not only one more armed formation and agent of Russia. It is the connecting link for the collection of intelligence data on natural resources in Africa. PMC Wagner also is collecting the data on government structure in Africa. They have tried already to apply in life all this data to win the support of potential leaders. According to the huge international investigation, the main task of PMC Wagner in Sudan includes in particular access to the resources that under sanction are used for the war against Ukraine. In this case, it is first primarily gold, that production of which Sudan ranks third in Africa. That's why history of our two countries are link connected. They are intertwined by red thread. Russia does not appreciate its citizens. We can note how the majority of Russians are poor and uneducated. Russia is only prioritizing, sucking and destroying. It is soaked with corruption and cynicism. And if the state does not value its citizens, what to expect in relation to peaceful civilians of other countries? Russia pays attention only on resources, expansion, and world domination, even at the cost of million peaceful civilian victims. Every day brings tones of disturbing news. Yesterday, Russia announced its withdrawal from the grain agreement, import of Ukrainian grain, including to Africa, Russia used not only Wagner. Hunger is a terrible weapon. As a result of the Holodomor organized by Russia in the 20th century, Ukraine lost many millions of people, and we warn that Russia may repeat it in Africa. Many nations are suffering from barbaric actions of Russia. It must be stopped at all costs. Russia must be isolated at the state level. Sanctions must be strengthened in order to drain its potential, so that it runs out of resources to implement its aggressive intentions all over the world. Russia must be excluded from all international organizations to eliminate its pressure at the international political level. Perpetrators of those crimes must be brought to justice before an international court and must be punished accordingly. Speaking of victims in Sudan, WHO announced about 1,000 deaths as a result of collisions, including foreign citizens. More than 3,700 people are injured. According to the UN WFP, 2.5 million Sudanese people are at risk of starvation. 24.7 million people need humanitarian aid and protection, and it is almost half of Sudan's population. General Secretary of UN is appalled by large-scale rapes in Sudan. He is particularly concerned about the deepening ethnic aspect of the confrontation, as well as spike in sexual violence across the country. As of July 23rd, 140,000 refugees have fled. 90% of them are women and children. In the internet space, we are reading horrifying stories of murders, rapes, assaults, and violence both in Sudan and in Ukraine. Since Russia's invasion in Ukraine, almost 9,000 people were killed. Civilian casualties is amounted to more than 24,000. According to the data of UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, the number of wounded Ukrainian civilians is reached more than 15,000 people, including 445 boys, 314 girls, and 276 children that the gender cannot be identified. The number of Ukrainian refugees who left Ukraine is reported about 8.5 million people, and I strongly believe that real facts are higher and many times. Blood runs cold in the veins from this terrifying statistic, and the brain refuses to perceive it as a reality. Since half a year from the beginning of Russian war in Ukraine, my brain denied to believe in the reality of what was happening. I lost many friends and loved ones. Many of them were civilians. I am sure that many of you saw shocking crime scene reports, shot cars with the kids on board signs, theater of Mariupol, where hundreds of women and children were buried in the rubble. There is an endless number of such stories, and worst of all, the military atrocities continue. Reading the horror stories of Sudan, I also don't want to believe it, but it is reality. I wish to express my personal appreciation and admiration for the strength of Sudan people, especially the women, who despite of all harassment, violence, and even the threats of life unite for sole purpose of helping and protecting. Amid the war, more than 49 peace humanitarian initiatives, as well as civil society organizations, were run by Sudanese women and united into a single Peace for Sudan platform. These women provide invaluable assistance in humanitarian, psychological, and other issues. The already difficult fate of Sudanese women was already affected by the war. War led to strong coordination between women's groups and creating strong solidarity. This group fixed the document violation, monitor the situation, claim for peace, and put pressure on the international community and other parts to support the resolution and achieve peace. Speaking about the role of Sudanese women, I am filled with pride because I can speak about them, I can study their contribution in the context of helping the affected civilian population. And their role resonates in my heart and soul, also because Sudanese and Ukrainian act to cure, to overcome crisis, and to stop the war. Every woman has an incredible potential, and united, we are, women, can defeat everyone and everything. And lastly, I strongly believe that if women rule the world, there would be no wars. If you don't stop it, who will? Thanks so much.